good evening to this roundtable. I say roundtable, and usually you have a picture of it in your mind of a round table with people sitting around the table, but this is a very, very large round table because we have people in Australia, we have people in the UK, and we have somebody in Italy. So it's a very big round table, but I'm sure you understand the concept. Today, I'm just to introduce myself. My name is Shug Sahadavan. I'm the CEO and founder of Testhouse Limited. We are a QA and QC consultancy company, which is quality assurance and quality control. Quality assurance being the process of taking an idea or from inception to delivery. From a software perspective, and that's one of the things that we do in quality assurance, and we focus heavily on D365, which is one of our core strengths. And I'll talk a little bit about D365, but we follow the waterfall, agile, and also the DevOps, kind of implementing DevOps for customers. That's roughly a quick 1-minute introduction of my organization. Dynamics D365 started as a number of different disparate products from Microsoft called Dynamics CRM, Dynamics AX, Dynamics Nav, and Dynamics Great Plains or GP. And Microsoft then invested heavily into that. They refactored, they recompartmentalized, redesigned, put a common bus underneath it called Common Data Services, and put it on the cloud and called it D365, and added a few more components or modules, if you like. So you've got the D365 sales module, you've got the marketing module, you've got the FinOps module, you've got the Business Central, you've got retail, you've got talent, professional services, and field services. I think I've covered most of those there. So really the idea is that you can run an organization buying the different modules, and you don't really need to have any other software.
I've been playing in the Dynamics Microsoft CRM space since 2002, since version 1.0 beta, or at least that's where I first IT. I'm an MCT. I've been an MCT since 2006. And I have worked on dozens and dozens of projects. And during that time, I have seen a lot of problems that come about through inadequate or even completely absent training and education. Absent training and education, or inadequate training and education, can certainly lead to what you feel subsequently is a Trojan horse, because you have something that maybe at sign off looked good, and you just see problem after problem after problem. They tend to occur for a range of different reasons, and in the small time I've got here, I'm going to run through what those key reasons are. The first and probably the most obvious is a lack of end user training that causes users to just not know what they're doing and be confused by the whole application. The second is where we have the technical people on the project who have done a bit. Typically they've learned how to add fields, but there are lots and lots of different techniques that we can use to solve any particular business problem within Dynamics 365. And unless within the group as a whole, you have got people that know lots of these techniques, there is no guarantee that the solution that you choose for a particular problem will be the correct one. And often, if you choose something that just superficially looks good, but under the hood is weak, that is where the problems will come out later. The third area that causes problems when we have this lack of training is where we have business people who argue that it's not their role to know what is in the technology before they start. And that is where they start asking for all kinds of things. And if that's then made worse by a technologist who is saying, yes, Mr. Customer, no, Mr. Customer, 3 bags full, Mr. Customer, we've got massive problems. And all of these contribute to that Trojan horse, things going wrong, things just coming out of the woodwork time and time again.
Thank you very much. That's very insightful, and I think that it's very useful as well. Some of these things that people forget, and I'm glad you mentioned about the training for the users as well as the technical staff as well, because people, we have lots of customers who've gone into using D365 without training, and the people, users, then sort of find themselves blaming the product and saying the product is not good because they're used to something a little bit different. So thank you very much, Joe. I'll move over to Peter. Over to you.
So hi, I'm Peter. I describe myself as a serial tester, so I've been in the QA game since the mid-80s, even before it was even thought of a career path for people. So, and over the course of the last 35 years, I've been involved in many digital transformation programs of various worth, from 5 million to 100 million to $560 million, and across that I've seen a pattern in some of the mistakes that are being made. So I want to just kind of talk to you about what I think are the areas for you to succeed in helping you minimize your testing cost and effort, but implementing exactly what you set out on the tin. So I guess the best place to start is requirements. And understanding the requirements, and taking it up to the next level from an assurance perspective is identifying the purpose. What is the purpose that the business are trying to achieve by implementing D365? What is it they want to achieve? Because if you understand that purpose, you can bring that lens to the requirements. And it's interesting for me in the world of QA how shift left is really picked up over the course of the last 3 or 5 years as Agile has become more predominant. But it still comes back to the basics, which is understanding the purpose, understanding the requirements, understanding that those requirements meet the purpose. And I think more often than not, there's not a lot of time or effort spent with that because the QA team doesn't join till later in the project. More often than not, the requirements are there when the QA team turn up, and they're then trying to map a purpose to a set of requirements. And I think if you invest time and money early, you save time and money later. And so getting experts in, and the test team itself has to be not pure testers. It needs to be a good makeup of subject matter experts, application experts, and of course, business analysts. It's not necessarily the need to have a full team of test analysts. You need a good makeup. If you take a look at any team, it's made up of different people. It's made up of all different types because people think differently. And that's the same for the QA thing. So if you set your team up properly and get them involved early, then you can map your requirements to purpose. One of the other pitfalls that I come across is that people don't think about the environments that are required for testing. And there's a supplementary one to that, and that's about the data and the data migration into those environments to support what you're trying to achieve. So a recommendation for me would be to use out of the box, because actually you shouldn't have to test that. It should work. Have a good set of environments that allow you to go through a life cycle, and more importantly, think about the future. Because one environment won't support the future. Products like D365 are released quarterly, monthly, half yearly, with major patches, minor patches. You need the legacy there. You need that environment footprint to allow you to keep progressing and progressing at speed. I referred to data migration a little bit a while ago, and I think that's key as well, because you are going to take data from one system to another. And I can guarantee you that the databases aren't exactly the same. So investing your time and effort in making sure that migration is right, again, means when you're physically testing the system, the integration testing or the system testing, your confidence where your issues are will be in the systems and not the data that you've migrated. A good data strategy will make any project successful from start to finish. So understanding and mapping that out as you go through your testing means you can sort all of that stuff early as well. A few programs I've worked on have just used the admin privileges to go all the way through the test lifecycle. And it's no surprise when you get to the end of it that people are struggling to understand why what they were doing before they weren't allowed to do now. And you get into those false positive defect situations where you are constantly chasing your tails to find an answer to a question that's already been answered. And so that's key. Having that data strategy, security strategy, admin strategy, user strategy, and pulling that all to the front end of the lifecycle to map it into the requirements that are being laid down. Because as you go through the testing lifecycle, people will be looking at you to be the expert. Not just the expert on testing, but the expert on the system. So for you test managers out there, make sure you build a team. Make sure you build a team that is multifunctional. Make sure it supports the end user, the development team, the business analysts, and it supports you. You pull all that together, you'll have a successful implementation.
As Peter mentioned, that you should take it out of the box and try not to make any changes to it. But if you do make changes to it and you do want to test it, you need to have people who understand the workflow and who understands D365 from day one to be able to add value. So they can, if they're coming in as testers on, for testing a D365 project, it's good to have people who have D365 knowledge, especially on the modules that you're implementing, to come and work with you from the early days so they can understand the requirements and to map it out early on.
I've worked in the CRM space now for in excess of 18 years, helping various organisations of sizes, complexities and diversities in their operations. The range of users is from 50 to 14,000 implementation in the CRM space, but more and more of my work to date is helping CRM programs that are not in the best shape. They are in a state of flux. They're in flight, have been going for possibly 12 months, and the end users and the senior directors and board level are not seeing the benefits, are not buying into CRM as a program, and therefore people start to question, is it the right thing to continue? Is it going to deliver to what the business needs? And is the cost going to continue to escalate? Where some programs, obviously the cost is important, the quality of what's being delivered is important. And some of the areas I'm going to cover briefly are really just high-level areas that can really help if you start to focus on these things to start with. So my work when I go into an organisation is really to work at the strategic level to start with, and some of the speakers you've heard from today have touched on some of these elements. But what's important? What's the organisation trying to achieve with its CRM when it's implemented it? What does it want to look differently for the organisation in a year, 2 years, 5 years' time? What does that look like? So I centre very much on what's the purpose? Why are you doing this? We can break down the detailed functionality with the end users after that, but what is the scope of what you're trying to achieve? Once that's clear, we then tend to look at the business case. So has the business case been factored in a way that sets out very clearly what the scope to set everybody's expectations of this program? What is that scope? What is it going to take to deliver a quality implementation? So then make sure that the business case has all the attributes it needs, including costings, which are appropriate for the skilled resources you may need. The business will need to be heavily involved in the implementation as we go through. So factor that in with resources that may need to be accommodated outside of their normal business work to spend time on the CRM program. So then looking at getting that agreed at board level, and that should then be bought into at every level of the business and shared at a certain level with the senior management teams that are going to have the CRM introduced to their operations, and the end users. Now, a lot of the projects and programs that are failing are due to the fact that they're being led by the IT itself, the technology. So they're either being led by the IT internal teams, and they take a lead role in the architecture, they take a lead role in protecting their current environments, because this will be something new coming their way that possibly they haven't dealt with cloud applications before. So there's a real nervousness there in how they approach this. So you need to bring them along with the journey, but it must be made clear that the CRM implementation is a business transformation program. It's not an IT, put a bit of kit on the desk and turn it on program. You need to get buy-in, you need to get adoption. And to help with that, the focus has to be on the change management. It's key that you have a solution like Dynamics that's very flexible and can provide many businesses with a richness of functionality and data and reporting. But if you have that sitting on someone's desk and they're not prepared to use it, they're not bought into it, they're not adding that richness of data to the system as part of their operations, then it really is an expensive piece of kit with lots of whizzy functionality that will never be realised and never bring the return on investment. So it's really key to centre on the change element, and that change covers all sorts of areas. It covers communications, it covers the business requirements process and getting people involved early in the program. It's the training, it's the testing, it's the quality. It really is everything that is non-IT. And I don't class testing as an IT function, and I'm sure Peter will agree with that. It's making sure that the scope of the program that was provided in the business case is actually being delivered at the end in terms of richness of capability for the organisation to perform better, more efficiently, and get market lead with their competitors. And to that end, I normally have a framework that I introduce that ensures that the work streams and the governance of a program is set up correctly. So the change management work stream will have many strands to that. The data work stream will run in tandem, and the IT and development work streams, which are invariably offered by external consultancies and system integrators of varying degrees and sizes. It's important to have that involvement right the way through the whole of the journey of the implementation. So I make sure that the framework that I introduce is something that I've used time and time again. It's tweaked and tailored to the organisation, but basically it means that every work stream is brought along at the earliest possible stage and not left to the end of the journey. So for instance, we don't get the IT and developers going off into a darkened room and coming back and producing something which the business users will only see at the point of UAT. It's important to bring them along, have regular show and tells with the business users that have contributed towards the requirements, making them feel comfortable. They will go back to their teams, and their management in turn will start to feel comfortable with the program, and the buy-in and the change management piece will naturally flow from those type of events. Equally, the trainers make sure they are heavily involved to start with and working in tandem with the business analysts. As the requirements are being gathered, let the training team understand what it's going to look like. Let them be involved in making sure they've got their materials and approach so they can have that in turn approved by the appropriate stakeholders. And all this can be done in a very clear way with governance at the heart of it, but making sure that the business understand and the senior management teams understand it's a business transformation program. An example of which is I've just helped a very large insurance company in the UK, and the first thing I asked their board of directors was, give me your understanding of what we are delivering and why for this particular program. And I had 10 different answers, and 2 of the board couldn't answer. And there's some of the main elements I would focus on. I would also suggest that some of the external consultants often get a bad name. They're often the whipping boys. If things are going wrong and if the testing is showing bugs, they will be the first people that point the fingers at. Bring those external consultancies along with you. It should be a collaboration. It should be a partnership. If they are successful, you are successful, and the organisation gets what it needs.
Stefano, over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Stefano from Italy. I'm as Sagu said, an MVP for business application, and I'm also an Azure certified architect and DevOps engineer. I work in Italy as an head of development team for an Italian Microsoft partner that has the mission to develop Dynamics 365 solutions on different markets. We work with small and medium and large companies, so I think that I see all problems that all these categories of companies have. I mainly focus on the ERP side. So nowadays, my main focus up to today is that side. I work also with all the stack of Dynamics 365, but the focus mainly is on the ERP side. And I actively collaborate with the Microsoft product team for developing the ERP products like Dynamics 365 Business Central, and for delivering official Microsoft trainings across Europe. From small companies to the largest companies, I see that the main problem, the major problems of difficulties that I observe when adopting Dynamics 365 solution can be, in my opinion, grouped into some categories. The first, it can be the rigidity in changing business process to adapt them to the software, because maybe lots of companies have consolidated all the systems and they are not ready to change the software, to adapt to the new software, but they want to the software that adapt to their business, and I think that's is always often an error. Another problem, technical problem that I see is often is the lack of trust in moving their business to a cloud solution, and companies are not ready on moving efficiently. They trust the cloud, but they are not ready to move efficiently to the cloud, because moving to the cloud is not only take a server from on-premise and go to the cloud, but it requires more than this. And another problem is often technical problem is often relating to historical data. They have often problem related to historical data, and maybe the main problem that I see is the methodologies they approach understanding the IT a renewable and IT process, because they start often companies start a renewal project, IT project without adopting the right methodologies. I think that DevOps practices can help you on making the software release faster, controlled, guarantee quality assurance, and so on. And embracing DevOps. DevOps is, I think, it's a name that is hot today, but embracing the DevOps mentality is not only just start the process and say that, okay, we are doing DevOps, we are doing Agile and so on, but we are using some tools related to DevOps. This is not adopting DevOps. I think that DevOps is a need that you should reevaluate your process. You should have standardized processes in particular way. You should analyze metrics of your process, and I think that this is not done often. For example, how you can handle releases, how you can handle your code, how your team that works with you is able to fix problems. These are metrics that I think that in a DevOps practice should be measured and they can help you on having a successful projects. The same is related also to adopting CI/CD processes that on Dynamics 365 is a must today. So use Report for your code base, use branches, use automatic building and releases. Don't work on production environment and stop, but create environments and create controlled automatic testing and releases phase. Because I think that if you have in place policies that permits you to automate testing, for example, it's much more performant, it's much more quality guaranteed instead of having a set of manual people that performs the same test again and again and again on every release.
But the key is not all at once, and then have reinforcement. And I think that will closely get you to enable you to eat that elephant one bite at a time. I think there is a shortage across the board of skills, but I think where we need to be investing our effort is more on the technical side, because an untrained or a poorly trained technical expert is very, very dangerous.
I think when there are internal project managers, invariably there will be, and program managers working on the project alongside others that may be brought in skill sets from the market. I think it's challenging for the permanent project managers, because they are very clear in terms of having to adhere to internal processes, both on the IT side, on the business side, and they have to make sure that they are, for want of a better phrase, ticking all the relevant boxes. However, some of those, by their very nature, those controls and processes internally that they need to adhere to, are constraints from a program and project delivering in the way that you would possibly want to. So the example would be that if an organization isn't used to delivering CRM programs, they're very different from upgrades to Windows 10, for instance. So the processes internally within the IT teams are very much geared to put in different widgets and upgrades in place from something like a Windows 10 upgrade, but not align themselves, and they don't lend themselves to CRM, which has to change the way it's looked at from a business point of view, the way the business processes change, the way that the implementation in the various environments, as we heard from Stefano earlier, that's all needs to be a different way of implementing CRM. So I think the project managers that are on premise, working for the organization, I think have a very difficult and challenging road, because on the one hand, they need to be seen to doing things in the way in which the organisation has to have it done, but they would like to bend and change because they're working as part of a dynamic programme and project team that need to work in a different way. The way I've combated that before is to make sure that the new way of doing things is brought to the right governance structures. So you take those things to your operational steercos, your IT teams through your directors through steerco meetings. So the governance allows you to have those discussions as to why you need to work in a slightly different way, and to get the buy-in at that level understood, so that the project manager who's going to be rewarded, who has a career with the organisation, isn't stepping out of line. We just change the way in which the organisation does things to make sure the CRM program can be successful, and in turn the project manager as well. Sometimes changing scope and changing direction should not be seen always as a bad thing, as long as it's done in a governed way with strict change management and governance processes around that. For any program of CRM, they can span from 6 months to 4 or 5 years. it's unlikely that an organisation will have the same strategic direction that's driving what they need throughout that 5-year period. So I think it's healthy to continue to look at the scope of what you're delivering, and make sure that it still aligns with what the business expectations are to meet their KPIs that they're looking to do and the return on investment from their CRM. So I think as long as the governance is there and you've got clear change management processes, and this comes back to, unfortunately, some of the legacy change management processes that I see are in place in organisations are not either robust or they're not followed. And that's because there's been this kind of way of working that if somebody in a hierarchy, in a senior position in the organisation wants something, they bypass the process. The way I manage programs is that we don't do that. If you want something changed, and there's a good reason for that, then you should take that change through the right process. And if it's a strategic change, which will impact a lot of the program delivery for CRM and would mean significant changes to functionality and business requirements that have been collected potentially, then you make sure that that's done at the right levels and cascaded down so that the new expectation of whatever we're now delivering is known by everybody.
I think absolutely yes. We suggest always to adopt DevOps tools and Azure DevOps in particular. Azure DevOps is a language, platform, and cloud provider agnostic tool. So it's not linked directly to Microsoft technologies, but you can use this tool to apply DevOps techniques to every product that you have in place. And I think that Azure DevOps is a great tool because actually is I think the main product in the market that comprises all the range of services that cover the full development life cycle of a product. You can start using Azure DevOps, for example, with boards for planning your projects, tracking work items, and opening and managing your teams. You can use Azure repos for handling your code base, branching, and so on. So protect all your code base, and I think it's a must to do. You can use Azure Pipelines. That's another feature of Azure DevOps that permits you to having in place without providing infrastructures a completely language and platform and cloud agnostic CI/CD tool that you can use for pipelines, for handling automatic committing and testing and building of your code without user interaction. So you place your code inside the repository, inside the particular branch. You can create easily a pipeline that tests your code, build your code, release maybe the code inside a testing environment. You can then with policies like authorization and so on, approvals, you can move this code from a testing environment to a quality environment where your user can directly perform testing, and then with a simple click, you can, when all agree to move in production, you can directly move your code in production.
And you've got this sort of system that you've built, which is on D365, which is migrated from some other data sources, and you've tested it all that. It's integrating with something else, and you've tested all of that, and you've added some functionalities of customization or configuration. So the whole thing has been tested and working very well, and all of a sudden here's this change that comes through from Microsoft in terms of a D365 change, and you can obviously be prudent and test those before you put it in, or you can be cavalier about it and say, no, I don't care, I'm just going to put it in and see what happens. But I don't think many of us are going to do that, and we would not advise to do that. But how do you think that you can mitigate against this evergreen solution, or what kind of solution can we put for evergreen? So those are two questions I'll leave you with.
I think earlier I was talking about early involvement. When I think about QA governance and oversight, I think it has to be day one. If it's not day one of the project, you're already not potentially setting yourself up for rework in the future. if I think about what do we look for, well, we look to make sure that things are testable. I mean, so I've been in the testing game since the mid-'80s. And the one thing that hasn't changed is if the requirements don't tell you what the functionality is going to do or the expected outcome, then it's very difficult to test. And so the earlier people can get involved in making sure, one, that you have an environment strategy that supports the outcome you're looking for, the requirements themselves are testable from all phases, not just a technology side of it, but the end user. Does the end user understand what the requirement is and how it's going to work in the new system? And can they map that back to their current process and adjust the process if they have to? And those conversations can be held when the QA guys are involved day one. And they're very much harder to have when the QA guys are involved day 10 or day 20 or month 3, because you're already down a path where you're making changes to an application that you don't need to, when there's a business process that could be changed just as easily. So my answer is, whenever anyone asks when should you be involved, I say day one. Has to be day one, because also you're part of the team. Successful delivery is building a team built around a joint culture that starts. The evergreen one is it's interesting. I mean, ultimately it comes down to, and Stefano alluded to this when he was talking, a solid automation strategy. Understanding what to automate, when to automate, how to automate going forward. So when you do have patches coming in on a monthly basis, you have an automation suite that can do the testing for you. And that automation suite can grow. Now, there's a little bit of a myth, I think, that automation means less cost, because you actually have to pay someone to automate it, and you actually have to pay for them to maintain the automation. It probably means a reduced cost, but not a less cost as some people are expecting. But that automation strategy means that you can cope with monthly patches, quarterly releases, 6-monthly releases, as long as you understand the content of what is being released. Your automation strategy can work through the elements you need to test.
Thank you all very much.